I'm Brent Boynton. Welcome to Living with Fire in the Mount Charleston area. This is a program about living safely in some of Nevada's high-risk fire environments. Mount Charleston is considered a very dangerous wildfire environment. Houses here are at great risk of burning. Fortunately, before a fire starts, you can do several things to greatly improve the odds of your house surviving. For the purposes of this program, the Mount Charleston area includes Kyle Canyon and Lee Canyon of the Spring Mountains. The Mount Charleston area communities are considered to be among Nevada's most vulnerable in terms of wildfire disaster. 4 important factors contribute to this wildfire threat. First, the area's steep slopes and narrow canyons. Flammable vegetation and dry, hot, and windy weather create a hazardous fire environment. These conditions can produce intense, uncontrollable wildfires. Evidence of past wildfires is found throughout Mount Charleston's neighborhoods. Fire scars on ponderosa pine trees and charred skeletons of mountain mahogany record the mountain's fire history. This videotape shows wildfires burning in environments similar to the Mount Charleston area.
Basically what that's doing is preheating the fuels ahead of itself, and then you have the convection column and the direct flame impingement. Come on guys, it's right below us. Come on, John. That's a fire you can't fight, you just get out of the way, right? Well, it's best to, yes. Yeah. Unless you want to become a crispy cutter. There you go, here's a good shot for you. Fire below us. Let's get...
Second, many of the Mount Charleston area houses have been built and are maintained in a manner that makes them easily ignitable during wildfire. Third, because there's only one way in and out of Kyle and Lee Canyons, there's a potential for people to be trapped by fire. And fourth, because these canyons experience intense recreational use during the summer fire season, there's a high potential for human-caused fires. Common human-caused ignition sources for the Mount Charleston area include vehicle fires, smoking, campfires, cooking fires, and children. These newspaper articles document Mount Charleston area wildfires that have threatened people and their homes. Although the Mount Charleston area wildfire threat is significant, much can be done to reduce this hazard. This program is designed to provide wildfire fuel management suggestions to reduce the wildfire threat to people, homes, and property in the Mount Charleston area. Wildfire fuel includes wildland vegetation, such as greenleaf manzanita, pinon pine, mountain mahogany, gamble oak, and ponderosa pine trees, ornamental plants in the home landscape, and, unfortunately, houses. Why is fuel so important? 3 factors control wildfire behavior: weather, topography, and fuel. And of those 3, we can only change fuel. Consequently, if we want to increase the odds of a house surviving a wildfire, our greatest opportunity lies in changing the fuel available for burning. The major fuel characteristics we want to change include the amount. Less fuel is better than more fuel. The height. Short fuel is less hazardous than tall fuel. Moisture content. Plants with high moisture content are more fire resistant than plants with low moisture content. Continuity. Fuels that are widely separated are more desirable than fuels that are close together. And finally, location. Hazardous fuels should be kept away from the house. By changing the fuels, we can change the behavior of a fire. We can keep it from starting, slow it down, cool it down, keep its flames shorter, and make it burn for a shorter period of time. All of these help a home survive wildfire. Investigations of houses destroyed by wildfire have consistently found that the fuel characteristics of the house and the adjacent vegetation are the most influential factors in determining house survivability. These factors usually determine which houses survive a wildfire and which houses are destroyed. This conclusion is significant because it implies that the most important person in preventing a house from burning is the homeowner, and it's the actions that a homeowner takes before a wildfire occurs that are critical. Wildfire can threaten a home in 3 ways: through direct contact by flames, through radiated heat, and by flying embers. First, contact by flames. This type of threat occurs when fuels burning near the house produce flames that come in contact with the home and ignite it. Direct contact by flames is probably what most of us picture when we think of a house burning in a wildfire. The next way wildfire threatens the house is through radiated heat. Radiant heat is produced by invisible electromagnetic waves that travel out in all directions from a flame. When a house receives enough radiated heat for a long enough time, it will ignite without flames ever touching it. Sometimes radiated heat can burst windows and let burning embers get inside the house. Consequently, we have to be concerned with vegetation and other fuels, even some distance away from the house. Radiated heat melted the vinyl siding on this house. Flames never touched it. But the most common wildfire threat to a house comes from flying embers. If conditions are right, pieces of burning material like small branches, pine cones, and wood shakes from a burning roof can be lofted high into the air and carried hundreds of feet to more than a mile from the actual fire. Wind and fire whirls can carry burning embers. If these burning embers land in places that have easily ignitable materials, like wood shake or shingle roofs, leaves and rain gutters, dry pine needles, trash, or wood piles, they can start a new fire. This is an example of a burning ember starting a fire. Fortunately, firefighters were already here, and they quickly stopped the new fire. In this smoky picture, burning embers have landed on the roof, have rolled down, and have been trapped in the rain gutter. The dried needles and leaves in the gutter ignited. Other embers started a fire in the flower beds. The following recommendations are made to reduce these 3 threats from wildfire. They're suggested practices endorsed by the program sponsors, not necessarily requirements. These recommendations do not take precedent over ordinances, codes, or laws. The wildfire threat reduction recommendations are presented in 3 categories: the built zone, the defensible space zone, and the access zone. Research shows that these 3 areas are important for a homeowner to manage in order to reduce the wildfire threat to the home. The built zone refers to how the house is constructed and maintained. The defensible space zone pertains to the vegetation growing near the house, including ornamental landscape plants and native vegetation such as Gamble's oak, ponderosa pine, and mountain mahogany. The access zone is the area that allows firefighters to locate and arrive at a home in a timely manner. The 3 zones are shown in this photo. The built zone includes the house, the defensible space zone includes the vegetation surrounding the house, and the access zone includes driveways, roads, and signage. First, let's look at the built zone recommendations. The goal for the built zone is to improve the ignition resistance of the house. If the house doesn't ignite, it can't burn. Research has proven what common sense would dictate. Houses highly resistant to ignition can survive even high-intensity wildfires. And conversely, homes that ignite easily can be destroyed even during low-intensity wildfires. This is a photograph of one of the more than 200 homes destroyed in the Cerro Grande fire in Los Alamos, New Mexico. In this case, the house ignited more easily than the surrounding vegetation. Notice the unburned trees, shrubs, and the wooden rail fence. The charred trees near the house burned because the house ignited. Here's another example of a house being more flammable than adjacent vegetation. While we are concerned about flame contact and radiated heat, we're particularly worried about flying embers igniting the house. The most common way houses start to burn during wildfire is from flying embers igniting the exterior of the house or getting inside through openings. Common exterior ignition sites include wood shake roofs, rain gutters filled with dried leaves, flammable materials such as paper, trash, and firewood on, beside, or beneath decks and porches, and wood siding. Embers enter the house through unscreened vents and open or broken windows. A homeowner should assume that anything readily flammable on or near the home will be ignited by flying embers. The following recommendations for the built zone are brief, generalized points. For more detailed information, contact your fire marshal. First, let's look at the roof. It's the part of the house most vulnerable to wildfire. It's also the best predictor of house survivability. Homes with wood shake or shingle roofs are many times more likely to be destroyed during a wildfire than homes with fire-resistant roofs. Putting sprinklers on wood shake or shingle roofs has limited value. Often during fires, water pressure is low, there's no electricity to pump water, and high winds make it difficult to wet the roof. The only effective solution to the wood roof hazard is to replace it with the fire-resistant type. Fire-resistant roofing materials include composition, metal, and tile. The fire resistance of a roof is rated A, B, C, or non-rated. An A rating has the highest fire resistance. Contact your fire marshal for examples of fire-resistant roof types and their ratings. Regardless of the type of roof, keep it free of fallen leaves, needles, and branches. Rain gutters can trap flying embers. Always keep the rain gutters clean during fire season. House vents are potential entry points for flying embers. You may have vents in your attic, foundation, and eaves. All vent openings need to be covered with 1/4 inch or smaller, non-corrosive wire mesh. Do not use fiberglass or plastic mesh because they can melt or burn. The siding covering the exterior walls of a house is particularly vulnerable to radiated heat and direct flame contact. Wood products, such as boards, panels, and shingles, are the most common siding materials. They're combustible, and they are not good choices for fire-prone areas. Log homes are a possible exception. They have a higher fire resistance rating than other wood products because logs tend to be denser than other products and burn more slowly. Non-combustible siding materials, such as stucco, brick, and cement board, are better choices. The eaves of the house are particularly prone to ignition. As a wildfire approaches, hot air and gases are deflected off the side of the house and trapped under the eave. Eaves can also trap heat from flames directly underneath them. Heat builds up under the roof and may get into the attic. The chance for ignition is greatly increased. By covering the underside of the eave with a soffit or boxing in the eave, we give the heat a better path to escape. Decks can also be potential heat traps. Since decks are often positioned on the downhill side of the house, they effectively trap heat, flames, and embers from an oncoming wildfire. The trapped heat dries out the wood decking and raises its temperature, making it easier to ignite. The threat increases when leaves, pine needles, dried grass, trash, and other combustible materials are allowed to accumulate under the deck, or firewood is stored there. Houses with decks that are open underneath are more likely to be destroyed. Preferably, the underside of the deck should be enclosed with fire-resistant material. At the very least, the underside of the deck should be enclosed with 1/4 inch or smaller wire mesh to prevent ignition from flying embers. Keep this area free of all combustible materials. Windows are one of the weakest parts of a house. They usually break before the building ignites. If it's exposed to enough heat for a long enough period of time, glass can crack and the fractured pieces may fall away. This allows burning embers and heat to enter the house, which may lead to internal ignition. Single-paned and large windows are particularly vulnerable. In high fire hazard areas, install windows that are at least double-glazed or tempered glass. Low-emission or low-E glass may provide added protection. This glass has been coated with a material that reduces the amount of radiant heat passing through a window, even in sunlight. Windows with aluminum frames and sashes are better choices than those with wood or vinyl frames and sashes. Exterior window coverings, such as shutters, can provide added protection. Chimney and stovepipe openings should be screened with 1/2 inch or smaller non-combustible mesh or have an approved spark arrestor cap. The final built zone recommendation is to keep the porch, deck, and other areas of the house free of combustible materials. Decorative items on porches such as baskets, dried flower arrangements, and pine cones have been known to ignite houses when burning embers land on them. Also keep these areas free of exposed newspaper, mail, and trash. Firewood stacks should be located at least 30 feet from the house. If the wood is stored uphill from the house, make sure that burning logs can't roll downhill and ignite the home. Fortunately, this homeowner followed this advice. The next set of recommendations concerns the defensible space zone. This zone includes the vegetation growing near the house. The term defensible space refers to the area between a house and an oncoming wildfire, where the vegetation has been managed to reduce the wildfire risk and allow firefighters to safely defend the house. For safety reasons, firefighters are more likely to protect homes that have an effective defensible space. Defensible space also improves the effectiveness of fire retardant and foam. In the event that firefighters are not available, defensible space also improves the likelihood of a house surviving without assistance. The defensible space zone is comprised of 3 areas: the non-combustible area, the lean, clean, and green area, and the wildland fuel reduction area. The non-combustible area lies right next to the house. The lean, clean, and green area extends out from the non-combustible area for at least 30 feet. The irrigated home landscape is often located within this area. The wildland fuel reduction area extends out from the lean, clean, and green area and is usually where natural vegetation like forest and brush fields grow. Unfortunately, when some homeowners hear the term defensible space, they picture a large expanse of bare ground surrounding their houses. While this is certainly effective at increasing home survivability during wildfire, it's unacceptable for aesthetic reasons and because it contributes to soil erosion. It's also unnecessary. A homeowner can have an attractive landscape that provides an effective defensible space and doesn't contribute to soil erosion. The following 6 steps describe how to create an effective defensible space. The first step is to determine how big it should be. The size of the defensible space zone is usually expressed as a distance extending outward from the house in all directions. The recommended distance is not the same for every house. It depends on the type of vegetation and the steepness of the slope. For homes located on flat to moderately steep terrain, in forest with sparse understory, the recommended defensible space distance is 100 feet from the house. For homes located on slopes greater than 40%, in forest with sparse understory, the recommended distance is 200 feet. For homes located on flat to gently sloping terrain in brush fields, that includes pinyon pine, juniper, and mountain mahogany woodlands, the recommended defensible space distance is 100 feet from the house. For homes located on slopes greater than 20% in brush fields, that recommended distance is 200 feet. A 20% slope is equal to 9 degrees. It represents a 2-foot rise over a 10-foot run. A 40% slope is equal to 18 degrees. It represents a 4-foot rise over a 10-foot run. Once you know the recommended distance for defensible space, mark it by tying strips of cloth or flagging to shrubs or low tree branches. The area enclosed there becomes the defensible space zone. The next 5 steps apply to the vegetation growing within this area. If the defensible space zone exceeds the property boundaries, don't work on someone else's property without his or her permission. It's important to note that the effectiveness of the defensible space zone improves when entire neighborhoods implement defensible space practices. Is there any dead vegetation within the defensible space zone? For the most part, dead vegetation should be removed from the zone. Dead vegetation includes standing, dead, and dying trees, which should be a high priority for removal. Recently fallen trees should also be removed. Downed trees that are embedded into the soil can be left in place. Their exposed branches, however, should be removed. Dead native shrubs and dead ornamental shrubs should be removed. Dead branches from live shrubs and trees should be pruned and removed. Dead flowers, both wildflowers and ornamental flowers in flower beds, should be removed. Dried grass should be mown and removed from the site. Dead pine needles are among the most flammable plant materials in Mount Charleston's forest. They should not be allowed to accumulate on or near the house. Remove dead pine needles attached to tree branches that are within 15 feet of the ground. Also remove dead pine needles draping shrubs and covering the ground for a distance of 30 feet from the house. For the most part, if dead vegetation is present within the defensible space zone, remove it. Within this defensible space zone are native trees and shrubs such as pine, sagebrush, mahogany, and Gambel's oak widely spaced, or do they occur in dense stands? Dense stands of trees pose a significant wildfire threat. If this situation is present within the defensible space zone, thin the stands. On flat to gently sloping terrain, the trees within the defensible space zone should be thinned to provide an average separation between their canopies of at least 10 feet. For homes on greater slopes, the separation distance should be greater. In addition to reducing the wildfire threat, thinning dense stands of trees can also improve forest health and make trees more drought-resistant. Dense stands of shrubs also pose a significant wildfire threat. Shrubs should be thinned to provide a separation. On flat to gently sloping terrain, less than 20% slope, individual shrubs or small clumps of shrubs within the defensible space zone should be separated from one another by at least twice the height of the average shrub. For example, if the typical shrub is 3 feet high, then there should be a separation between shrub branches of at least 6 feet. Remove shrubs or prune them to reduce their height and or diameter. On steeper slopes, the separation distance should be greater. If you have a dense stand of trees and or shrubs in your defensible space zone, create a separation through removal or pruning. Now let's take that separation principle to the vertical realm. If trees are present within the defensible space area, there should be a separation between the low-growing vegetation and the lowest tree branches. Vegetation often occurs at different heights or layers, like the rungs in a ladder. For example, in this photograph, dried grass, pine needles, and fallen branches are the lowest rung, shrubs are the next highest rung, and low tree branches form the upper rung. Vegetation that can carry a fire burning in low-growing plants to taller plants is called ladder fuel. In the left photo, a burning shrub has ignited the lower branches of a ponderosa pine tree. Ponderosa pine and other Mount Charleston trees supply a large amount of potential fuel for a wildfire. Once they're ignited, they can burn very intensely, as shown in the photo on the right. By removing some of the rungs of the ladder, the amount of wildfire fuel can be greatly reduced and fire can be kept on the ground. The recommended separation for ladder fuels is 3 times the height of the lower vegetation layer. For example, if the lower layer is 3 feet tall, there should be a separation of 9 feet. Prune the lower tree branches, shorten the shrubs, or remove lower plants. When no understory vegetation is present, remove lower tree branches to a height of at least 5 feet above the ground. This will help prevent burning needles and twigs lying on the ground from igniting the tree. This photograph shows two properties. The property on the left has removed the ladder fuels. The removal of ladder fuels is an important step in creating an effective defensible space. If ladder fuels are present in the defensible space zone, remove them. Now, is there a lean, clean, and green area extending at least 30 feet from the house? By lean, we mean that only a small amount of flammable vegetation, if any, is present within 30 feet of the house. By clean, we mean there's no accumulation of dead vegetation or flammable debris within 30 feet of the house. By green, we mean that plants located within 30 feet of the house are kept healthy and green during the fire season. Having a lean, clean, and green area serves two purposes. First, it eliminates easily ignitable fuels or kindling near the house. In the event that flying embers were to land in your yard, they couldn't start a fire. Second, it keeps fire intensity low if a fire does ignite near the house. Should a fire start within 30 feet of your house, the fuels present would be unable to generate enough heat for a long enough time to ignite your home. For some Mount Charleston area homeowners, the lean, clean, and green area is maintained as a formal residential landscape using lawn, ornamental plants, and patios. Other residents prefer a more natural-looking lean, clean, and green area that emphasizes native vegetation. Regardless of the type of landscape you prefer, consider the following fire-smart tips for the lean, clean, and green area. Within this area, remove most or all flammable native plants. Flammable native plants include shrubs such as greenleaf manzanita, sagebrush, rabbit brush, and cliff rose. Small native trees such as mountain mahogany, Gambel's oak, pinon pine, young ponderosa pine, white fir, and Utah juniper are also recommended for removal from within the lean, clean, and green area. If you want to keep a few of these as specimen plants, make sure they're free of dead wood and leaves, they're pruned to reduce the amount of fuel, and they're widely separated from native brush fields and forests. It's also acceptable to keep native wildflowers like lupin, phlox, and penstemon. However, the top growth should be removed once it dries out and turns brown. Deciduous native trees, such as aspen, can also be retained. Native ground covers pose little fire threat and are effective in controlling soil erosion. They're good plants to keep in the lean, clean, and green area. If you want to plant fire-resistant vegetation in the lean, clean, and green area, we have some good news and some bad news. First, the bad news. Unfortunately, there is no such thing as a fireproof plant. Any plant can burn if it's exposed to enough heat for a long enough period of time. The good news is that some plants don't ignite as easily nor burn as hot as other plants. Here are some rules of thumb for selecting plants for the lean, clean, and green area. All other things being equal, shorter plants are a better choice than taller plants. Taller plants can produce longer flames, and they contain more fuel than low-growing plants. Mainly use plants that are less than 2 feet tall when they're mature. When they're green and healthy, herbaceous plants like flowers, succulents, and lawn are better choices than woody plants, such as shrubs and trees. Healthy herbaceous plants have a much higher water content than woody plants. The higher the plant's water content, the harder it is to ignite and the more slowly it burns. However, when herbaceous plants dry out, they ignite easily. At that point, they are a fire hazard and they should be removed. Many evergreen shrubs and trees contain flammable oils and resins that burn very hot when ignited. Because of this, deciduous shrubs and trees are usually a better choice for landscape use in the defensible space area. There are several particularly bad plant choices when landscaping in the lean, clean, and green area. Ornamental juniper and arborvitae can burn very hot. Also, their dead leaves often accumulate in and under them and are extremely flammable. They're easily ignited by flying embers. Ornamental pines, such as Scotch pine, Austrian black pine, and mugo pine, are poor choices for use in the lean, clean, and green area. Scotch broom has been identified as a particularly flammable plant, as are most large ornamental grasses when they become dry. Both are considered poor choices. Good choices for the lean, clean, and green area include deciduous shrubs such as shrubby cinquefoil, barberry, and spirea. Green lawn is low-growing and has a high water content, and therefore is an excellent lean, clean, and green area plant choice. However, lawn does have its drawbacks. It requires a relatively large amount of water and relatively high maintenance. Conservation grasses like sheep fescue and wildflower mixes may be suitable alternatives to lawn for some people. When they're green, they're fire-smart plant choices for the lean, clean, and green area. But once they turn brown and dry, they should be mowed and removed. Flowers, including perennials, annuals, succulents, and bulbs, are good choices, so long as they are actively growing. Once they start drying out and turn yellow, dead leaves and flowers should be removed. Ground covers are excellent choices for the lean, clean, and green area. Well-maintained deciduous trees are also good choices. Plant deciduous trees so they'll have at least a 10-foot separation between their branch tips at maturity. Emphasize the use of hard surfaces and mulches within the lean, clean, and green area. Hard surfaces include materials such as concrete, asphalt, and brick. Mulches can be rock, wood, or bark. Rock mulches, such as gravel and cobble, are a great choice for the lean, clean, and green area. Wood and bark mulches may be flammable and should be kept at least 2 feet away from combustible house and deck materials. Wood and bark mulches should also be kept moist during the fire season. A potential problem: the propane tank is often located in the lean, clean, and green area. All flammable vegetation should be cleared from within 10 feet of the propane tank. Screening the propane and other fuel tanks with fire-resistant materials can provide additional protection. Please check with your local fire marshal for possible code requirements for propane tank screens. Do not store flammable materials like firewood or gasoline next to the propane tank. Problem tree limbs should be removed. This includes limbs within 10 feet of the chimney, limbs touching the house or deck, limbs hanging over the roof and within 6 feet of it, and limbs encroaching on power lines running from the street to the house. The last lean, clean, and green tip is to create a non-combustible area at least 2 feet wide around the base of the house. During intense wildfires, flying embers tend to accumulate right next to the house. If wood mulches, pine needles, or dried plants are present, they may start burning and ignite the house. Houses with wood siding are particularly vulnerable. Even low-intensity fires burning through a continuous layer of pine needles leading up to the house have destroyed homes. Many of these homeowners could have averted disaster by simply having a non-combustible area. The non-combustible area needs to have a very low potential for ignition from flying embers and should serve as a fire break for pine needle litter fires. This area should extend at least 2 feet from the base of the house. Within this area, use irrigated herbaceous plants like lawn, ground covers, and flowers, and use rock mulches and hard surfaces. Do not allow easily ignitable materials such as pine needles, dried plants, wood mulches, and trash in this area. To sum up, for a distance extending out at least 30 feet from the house, create a lean, clean, and green area. The last step to creating a defensible space is maintenance. Defensible space is an ongoing activity. Plants grow back, and flammable vegetation needs to routinely be removed and disposed of properly. Before each fire season, reevaluate your property using the previous 5 steps and implement the necessary defensible space recommendations all over again. The final category of recommendations pertains to the access zone. This deals with the ability of firefighters to locate and arrive at a threatened house in a timely manner. A house is much more likely to survive a wildfire if firefighters are present. A proper access zone also helps you and your family safely evacuate. Some neighborhoods are a virtual maze under the best of circumstances. Add the dark, smoky conditions of an intense wildfire, and it gets even harder to find a particular house in need of assistance or to evacuate safely. It's also important to realize that the firefighters may be from out of town and not familiar with the neighborhood. The following recommendations will make a house more accessible to firefighters. The home address should be readily visible from the street. The characters on the address sign should be at least 4 inches high, and the sign should be fire resistant. There should be street signs at each intersection leading to your house. These signs should also feature characters at least 4 inches high and made of reflective, non-combustible material. Driveways with lots of flammable vegetation growing next to them are a deterrent to firefighters. Flammable vegetation should be removed from at least 10 feet on both sides of the driveway. Obstructions like overhanging branches should be removed to provide at least a 15-foot vertical clearance. Houses at the end of long driveways should have turnaround areas suitable for large fire equipment. Without a turnaround area, firefighters may be reluctant to place engines near the home. Homes located at the end of long, narrow streets and dead ends can also discourage firefighters and complicate evacuation. If possible, create an additional access route and turnouts. This program described the wildfire threat in the Mount Charleston area and offered recommendations for reducing that threat. The wildfire threat reduction recommendations fell into 3 categories: the built zone, the defensible space zone, and the access zone. The built zone recommendations dealt with creating a more fire-resistant house. The defensible space zone recommendations concerned the management of vegetation to reduce the wildfire threat. The access zone dealt with the ability of firefighters to locate and arrive at your home in a timely manner. It's fair to ask, will implementing all these recommendations make a difference? Based on examinations of houses destroyed by wildfire, we know the answer is yes. This graphic shows the roof and vegetation characteristics of more than 2,000 homes destroyed by wildfire in California. The gray houses had wood shake roofs, and the brown houses had fire-resistant roofs. The red arrows indicate the distance of each house from flammable vegetation. The size of the flames and the yellow numbers show the percentage of each house type actually destroyed by wildfire. Notice that of the houses with wood shake roofs and less than 30 feet from flammable vegetation, 50% were destroyed by wildfire. But less than 1% of the houses with fire-resistant roofs at least 100 feet from flammable vegetation was destroyed. Implementing these recommendations won't guarantee that your home will survive a wildfire, but it will certainly improve your odds.
Thank you for watching and listening to Living with Fire in the Mount Charleston area. We hope you've learned some valuable information that will help you protect your home from wildfire. To learn more about how to reduce the threat of wildfire, contact your local fire prevention agency or Ed Smith with the University of Nevada Cooperative Extension at area code 775-782-9960. This program was produced by the University of Nevada Cooperative Extension with funding from the Bureau of Land Management through a National Fire Plan grant and assistance from KOLO News Channel 8 and the Media Center.